Welcome to the Real Wealth Podcast. This week I'm going to be talking about one of the most valuable commodities in life. I'm not talking about gold, I'm not talking about silver, I'm not talking about oil. I am, of course, talking about time. It's the one thing that we never have enough of, and it's the one thing we all want more of. And when I have met with other successful people in life and studied other billionaires, multimillionaires, it's key that they all have one common thing, that they are aggressively protective over their time. An example of this recently, a few weeks ago on this podcast, I interviewed Ajmal Mushtaq, and we had an extensive chat about time and how he managed his time. And as an entrepreneur or anyone who's starting to build their wealth, it's sometimes difficult to know what the key things are that are going to move your business forward. And whilst he talked about the huge amount of hours he used to work at the start, my question was around, how did you make sure that those were effective and efficient hours? Because it's easy for us all to hustle hard. That used to be the old rhetoric for many people is, hustle harder than your competition and you can win. But the reality is now you have to hustle smart. And that really is the key for a lot of people. And I was trying to understand from Ajmal, how do you make sure that time was well spent, value added time that was moving your business forward? Because being a busy fool is never beneficial for anybody. So he was very clear and very succinct on how he spent his time and how he protected his time. He was able to give me specific percentages on how he spent his time moving his business forward and the key value added activities that move his business forward. He also talked about the egg timer that he keeps on his desk to make sure that when he is having meetings that they're efficient and effective and get to the point as quickly as possible so he can then move on to the next key value added task. So it's a theme that we see time and time again. Everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. How is it the case that some people can achieve so much more out of life and they have the same amount of time as the average person who achieves very little out of life other than being a consumer of the world? You look at someone like Elon Musk, who's involved in 4 or 5 multi-billion pound companies all at once. He has Tesla, he has SpaceX, he has Solar City, he has Twitter now, Neuralink. A huge amount of stuff going on for that guy, but he still manages to move every business forward and is hugely successful because he must be very, very specific about how he spends his time. You also find with a lot of the super rich, a lot of multi-millionaires, that they don't actually necessarily work that hard. They don't work those crazy hours that a lot of people that are trying to get the business off the ground have to. And I always go back to the analogy of the rocket ship leaving uses about 80% of its fuel just getting off the ground. So there is that need at the start when you're setting your businesses up, or when you're trying to get your initial investments in place. You do have to spend a lot more time on it to get it off the ground. But once it's going, if you systemize and leverage in the right way, then you can ensure that things move forward at a rate that increases your results without you having to be heavily involved on a day-to-day basis. So that old rhetoric of you have to work hard, you have to be, the first person in the office, the last person at night, it's a bit outdated, especially as technology moves forward. We're in the age of artificial intelligence. It is all about working smart and moving it forward that way. I once read a book that was recommended to me by 50 Cent, called Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. And, I stopped reading the book after a while because, I could see the hustle harder element of it. The guy was talking about all the hours that he spent working in the gym, working on his music, to a point where his family relationships fell down. He hardly seen his kids. He had one after another of failed relationships. It didn't seem to me to be the right story of today, where you need to be working smart. So, I think there's so many good books out there for anybody that's looking to evaluate how they're spending their time. And we'll go into that in a little bit. But the most important thing, I think, for many of us to realise, and it's certainly the biggest thing we get feedback on when people come to work with us, where we're trying to move forward their business and help them build a buy-to-let portfolio, is that they just don't have time. They don't have time to do the things that we're asking them to do that are going to improve their life going forward, because they're stuck in the day-to-day monotony of it. And it's a question of taking a step back, looking at what you're doing and analysing whether or not this is really value-added activity or not, being completely aggressive with your time and how you spend it, and making sure that you're not wasting a whole bunch of time. So many people are stuck in the employee mindset because it's what we're taught from a very young age, is you get paid for the hours that you give to your employer. So the employee mindset is controlled by this formula, a very simple formula, that your income, the amount of money that you can earn, is limited by the rate of pay that you get multiplied by the amount of hours that you can work in the day. And it's a very limiting formula. It's very hard to drive exponential wealth. Even for people that are CEOs, there's still a limit on how much they can earn in the year. There's no limit on entrepreneurship. If you can provide value to as many people as possible, the more people you can provide value to through your business, the richer you can become and the more wealth you can create. You're not hampered by this very limiting employee mindset formula. And the reality for most people is that they get a job, they have a good rate of pay. If they want to try and get a bit of extra income, the only option they have is to work extra hours. And if you work extra hours and you start to get a bit more money, the likelihood is most people will start to spend that money. They'll improve their lifestyle. They'll get a nicer car, a bigger house. And then they suddenly find themselves in this cycle. To maintain that, they have to keep working those long hours. And before you know it, you're working 80-hour weeks just to keep you where you are. You're not moving yourself forward. And it's a very dangerous cycle to get pulled into. Conversely, for people who build great wealth, the formula changes. The formula becomes fundamentally different because their income is limited only by the rate that they can receive, the amount of time that's worked, and the leverage that they use. And the word leverage in this formula changes the script completely, because leverage can mean, leveraging other people's time. And a very simple example of this is if you are a building contractor and you just give guys out to sites, you're charging an extra £2 an hour on top of their hourly rate. You're making £2 for every guy that's on site. If you've got 2,000 people out on site, that's £4,000 per hour that you can be earning without actually having to do anything. You can have the administrative side of things set up in the background, so you're not even working in that process. That is a very simple understanding of how entrepreneurship can lead to massive leverage and can take the restriction of this employee mindset formula completely away. The wealthy use leverage to make money. Business owners use leverage. If we go back to Robert Kiyosaki's ESBI quadrant, so the E being employees, S below it being self-employed, then you go to business owner level. At business owner level, you start to use leverage. Employees and self-employed are generally just exchanging their time for money, albeit self-employed people have a bit more control over that. Business owners start to leverage other people's time to make them money. And at investor level, the ultimate target for anybody that's looking to build their wealth is when you get income passively. You're invested in a company, you're not involved in the day-to-day running of that company, but you do get income from it on a regular basis. That's ultimately the target. That's the maximum use of leverage throughout wealth creation. So ultimately, when we're talking about leverage, we're talking about being incredibly protective over your time and making sure that when you are spending time moving something forward, it's a key value-added activity. It's something that is going to take you to the next level of wealth. And the way that we do that, some of the key rules around leverage is, first and foremost, you have to be aggressively protective over your time. I gave you the example of Ajmal Mushtaq. Secondly, you have to leverage other people and other people's time. That's either through having employees or outsourcing. You can leverage other people's money. We do that a lot within property. If we look at the ability to leverage within property, is probably unrivaled within any other investment type. Take the average sort of £250,000 property. Now, we don't have to buy that all cash. If that was a stock or share, you would be buying it cash, and you would be making a return on the £250,000 of cash that you put into that deal. Whereas we can look at property and say, well, I can get 75% of that 250k investment from the bank, which means I only have to put 25% down. My return will be on the £62,500 deposit that I put in, not the entire 250,000, but I still get all of the capital appreciation of that 250k asset. So average property increases, properties double every 12 years. So, that 250,000 extra value in that property within 12 years is entirely mine. And I've only invested £52,500 in that example. So debt leverage and leveraging other people's money can be a huge accelerator of wealth as well. That's something that we've done to great effect in property. And I think the other thing about leveraging is rationalising everything that you do on a day-to-day basis. Look at what you can eliminate from your life, the things that are not adding value to your life, where that time could be spent doing more income generating activities, things that are going to make you money, things that are going to move your business forward, things that are going to move your side hustle forward, and get rid of those things that just add zero value to your life. You can delegate, you can look at who you can pass things off to, which again are not value added activities. They're not moving anything forward to allow you to focus on the key things. And you can outsource, and there's a whole bunch of outsourcing opportunity there just now, and I'll go into that in a bit. The important thing to focus on with leverage is to know your own value. Know how much money you can create from having focused time, focusing on income generating activities, and rationalize everything else that you're doing. We go back to the likes of, whether or not you cut your own grass or clean your own house. Those are decisions to be made. It's a calculation to be made based on whether or not you can generate more income in that time and afford to pay someone else to do that. If it costs you 20 quid an hour to get your grass cut, but you can make 100 quid an hour, then that's a decision to be made whether or not you should be outsourcing that and allowing you to have more focused time to build your business and grow your wealth. And those are decisions that you should be regularly analysing, and you should be doing regular calculations to understand what is my value and how can I increase it, which ultimately is going to lead to me increasing my wealth in the long run. So in terms of elimination, I think the standard things that we talk about just now is there's probably way too many people watching way too much television. If you're watching 2, 3, 4 hours a day of television, you have to be thinking to yourself, this time is not value added. I'm not bringing anything to my life. Even if you're watching educational documentary stuff, that can add value, but not at that level of time, 3 to 4 hours a day. You could be doing something much more productive. We'll have people that are not achieving the objectives that we've set them down within our coaching program for the last month. And if I could see what they've been spending in front of the television, you could clearly see they're just not putting the time in. They're just not focusing on what's moving them forward. Another example of this is if I could take anybody's phone. If you've got the iPhone, you can see what your screen time is on an average day. Most people's screen time is going to be way too much. 2-3 hours scrolling, complete nonsense that is not helping them whatsoever. And actually becomes habitual for a lot of people. When they're bored, they just pick up their phone and look, that is not someone who's focused. You actually find a lot of billionaires that they don't even have phones on them on a regular basis because they want to be focused. Even in our working day, I find it's really important to put my phone away so I can focus on a task. And the amount of work that you can get done when you can focus, when you're uninterrupted, where you're not constantly getting notifications through on your phone and breaking your concentration on the task that you're trying to do. I mean, that's hugely powerful. And it's just a small change, but so many people are in the habit of just being attached to this phone and picking it up anytime they're bored. A lot of people sleep too much as well. I think the average person needs about 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep per night. If you're up watching television to 12 o'clock at night and then you don't get up till 8 a.m. in the morning, you're losing some really valuable time. And having that time in the morning, it doesn't work for everybody, but I've found more often than not, having extra time in the morning to do key result area activities, or move forward your side hustle before you start work if you're still employed, it's hugely valuable, because if you try and do that at night, you're going to be too tired by the end of the day. So I've always found early morning working to be massively productive. When we were starting our business and Laurie and I both had full-time employment, we used to get up 4 a.m, 5 a.m. in the morning, and we'd be messaging each other, and we'd be working on presentations, we'd be working on deals. We'd get so much done before the standard working day starts. It moved us forward massively in the early days. There's actually a book that I love by Robin Sharma called The 5 a.m. Club. And again, there's so many books on personal improvement and how to get the most out of your time out there. A few of the big ones. 5 a.m. Club's a big one. You've got the 4-Hour Working Week by Tim Ferriss. You've got Atomic Habits. You've got Life Leverage by Rob Moore. There's a whole host of these books on how to get more out of your day and how to achieve more in life. And it's a fundamental topic, but I particularly like the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma because it gives you this 60-minute process in the morning that has massively helped my days and the structure of my days since I did it. So broadly speaking, the 6 a.m. Club, the 5 a.m. Club, it gives you a 60-minute program where you spend 20 minutes of exercise. And the idea with that is, getting up that early, you want to be awake, you want to be ready to go, and a little bit of cardio exercise can get your heart pumping. What happens when you exercise is it reduces your cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone. It's highest in the morning. So if you can reduce your stress levels, wake yourself up. Not only are you up at 5 a.m, you're awake, you're ready to go. The next 20-minute program is for planning your day. What are my key value-added activities today? What do I need to get done to move things forward? If you don't do that in the morning, the chances are you'll just get pulled away with the day, especially as an entrepreneur. When you're building multiple businesses and you've got staff, there's going to be people coming in and out the door. If you're not very laser focused on what you need to achieve in that day and structuring your time around it, then you can really lose a lot of ground in the early years. And I guess as your business grows, that becomes just as much of a challenge. So, I think, again, you'll see that a lot of successful people in life have mastered that ability to control their day, control their time, structure the day. So that second 20-minute slot within the 5 a.m. Club routine is to have time to think about your day, maybe do a bit of meditation, visualization, anything that gives you more focus going into the day. You can also review yesterday and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what was I trying to achieve, why didn't I achieve it, what can I change today to move that forward. And then there's this last 20-minute section, which is for personal improvement. So whether that's listening to a podcast or doing a bit of research or reading a book, it's not a lot of time actually. I tend to spend my last slot in the car. I've got a 40-minute commute, so I've got time to listen to podcasts or listen to an audiobook. But I find that formula, that simple formula for the morning, by the time I get into the office, I'm ready to go. I know what I need to achieve in the day. I'm focused on it. I don't have a massive to-do list of 100 things that I want to get done this week. I've got a very specific list of things that I want to get done today that I am not going to leave the office until they're done. And I've been back and forward with this. There's times where it's dropped off and I couldn't get up at 5 a.m. because, we had other commitments and we were working late and all that. But I've found I always go back to this because I know it's the process that works and it makes me the most efficient version of me. And I think that's it with a lot of these self-help books. There is a lot of option out there. It's really important to kind of read a few of them and try to find what works for you. But ultimately, it's about instilling habits that make sure that you structure your day, get the most out of it, and you become the best version of yourself to move your business and move your wealth forward. So I think that's an important point. Adding things like that into your day that can help, and removing things that are not adding value to your life. Going to bed too late, watching too much television, doing tasks around the house that aren't maybe necessary, having too many nights out, drinking alcohol, especially through the week when you're trying to focus. These are things that are moving you further and further away from your goals. So you need to find a way to bring it back. So that's elimination, very important part of leverage. Delegation. So look at any tasks or jobs that you either don't like doing, and everybody's got a bunch of jobs that they hate doing, but usually what happens is you don't do them very well, or you leave them to the last minute, and they might still be important, maybe not critical key value add activities, but they are still important and need to get done. Expenses are always a nightmare for me. I always leave it to the last minute, and I've now found a way that the accounts assistant in our office does my expenses for me because, they get fed up waiting on me. It's not adding a lot of value me doing that. Someone else can do it, so I delegate it. And you may make the argument that you're just starting out, you're just trying to build your wealth. You don't have anybody that you can delegate to. But even if you're in a partnership, there are things where you say, okay, I'm trying to build this business for us as a sort of side hustle while working, and maybe you say your partner, there's a couple of things that you could pick up from me in the meantime while I'm trying to do that, so I can get some extra time, whether it's, spending a bit more time looking after the kids where you would normally be doing it, or whether it's, a bit more of the stuff around the house. Delegation can be, a hugely beneficial way to create a bit of extra time to move things forward. And, you've also got extended family members and seeing what they can do to help you in this key time where you're trying to change your life ultimately. So that's delegation. And then you've got outsourcing. In the early days, we had a virtual assistant. So, you can go onto websites like Fiverr and you can get someone to do sort of menial tasks for you that are quite repetitive, that free up your time so you can focus on the bigger things. And you don't have to pay these people a lot of money, depending on where they're from, where they're located, and what the task is. It can be a relatively small cost to outsource a lot of administrative things. You've got accountants that you can outsource to. You've got more and more things actually that you can outsource now. You've got people that will run your social media for you. You've got people that will run various elements of your business. There are websites like Fiverr, Upwork, Gig Grabbers, Freelancer. There's loads of websites out there that allow you to outsource certain elements of what you're trying to do to help you move your business forward without having to hire people or take on big costs in the early stages of business or entrepreneurship. Outsourcing is a big one, and now we are in the world of artificial intelligence, and I think that is massively going to change the game when it comes to outsourcing, because things that would have taken a long time are now done much quicker with some of these AI websites that are available. The obvious one is ChatGPT. If I'm doing a podcast, I can do a bunch of research for the podcast just by putting a few prompts into ChatGPT. When we are writing new ads for one of our businesses, we can get all of the sales copy optimized through ChatGPT. We can get images created through Midjourney AI, where you give it a prompt of what sort of image you're looking for, and it'll create it for you, and it can refine that. There's so many of these artificial intelligence websites that can do so many cool things. We're using it a lot just now for marketing and sales. We're using it a lot just now for content, social media content, but the applications are getting bigger by the day. The amount of, you can get ChatGPT to do spreadsheets now. The amount of activity you can get done relatively free. If you want access to ChatGPT 4, I think there's a small charge, but these AI websites are incredible. And I think we done an episode on AI in general last week. In the future, I'm going to do a specific episode on AI for business and what sort of applications are out there to help you build your wealth, whether it's through entrepreneurship, whether it's through a side hustle, or even whether it's through investment and how that can support you with things like research into companies. There's a lot of things you can do to create more time. The critical thing is understanding what your key value added activities are, what's moving you forward, what's building your wealth, and eliminating the things that is taking you further away from it. You also need to know your own value. I've mentioned that already, but there are certain things that you can do to start understanding what your value is, and it's a simple calculation ultimately, but it's one that you should be doing regularly, because as your side hustles and as your investments grow, the amount of money that you earn based on the time that you spend can grow exponentially. So you can start a work log of looking at how you spend your time, be absolutely honest about it. You can identify what is an income generating activity, work out what percentage of the total time you spend is on that income generating activity, and that will allow you then to understand what your income generating value is. Pareto's principle, or the 80-20 rule as it's better known, suggests that we spend 20% of our time creating 80% of the output, or 20% of our time creating 80% of our income generating, our income that's generated. So, and actually that's a formula that you find more and more in life. We understand as Rood Group, as employers, that our employees are not productive for 8 hours solid every day. The reality is we're probably getting productive work out of them for the first 4 or 5 hours of the day, and then as the day progresses, as it gets later in the day, that tails off. And the reality is they could probably do 4 or 5 hours of efficient work every day and get everything done that they need to do for that day, without having to spend the full 8 hours at work. And that's the reality of it. And an example of this is, when I was in my corporate career, at the time when we were building Rood Group as a side hustle, I had a job in finance. I was finance controller for the Western Hemisphere of a large oil and gas company. So I was responsible for finance for the US, Canada, Argentina, Mexico, and Brazil. Big region, lots of operations going on. There was probably 30 factories within that area. And over the 6 months that I was doing that job, the first 6 months, I spent time looking at what are the things that are critical to achieving success in this role. And the ultimate success, really, the key point of my job is to be able to stand in front of the board at the end of every month and be able to succinctly explain the financial performance of those businesses, what's performing, what's not, where the issues are, and tell that story through the medium of the financial results. So that presentation was a hugely important part of it. I also had to make sure that the finance managers were operating in each one of those areas effectively and that they were reporting correctly. And those were really my two key outputs as finance controller for that region. So I spent a lot of time looking at the month. How does the month look? What am I spending time on that is moving me towards achieving those two things, and what am I spending time on that is not achieving that? And what I found is there was a huge amount of calls, especially when you came at month end, where you're meeting each site, you're going through the financials, and the reality is it wasn't adding much value. It wasn't adding much value for my ability to be able to stand up there and explain the numbers, because we were just going into way too much detail. It wasn't, it was far too granular in terms of the information. So I stripped a lot of that back. In terms of the performance of the finance departments, I just looked at the key people and key roles, and I moved people around. I got rid of a few people, brought a few new people in, and over the course of 6 months, I'd managed to boil down what was probably a 60-hour week to effectively do this job into about 20 hours. And that completely revolutionized the amount of time that I then had available to spend on income generating activities for Rood Group, to build Rood Group, to increase my side hustle, because I boiled the job that I was doing down to the most key result areas and made sure that I performed in those areas. And honestly, although I was working much less than my predecessor, everybody was happy with the results that I was given, and that was a critical learning for me. And I think Steve Jobs said this at some point, is I want to hire a lazy person. I want to hire someone who's going to find the most time efficient and effective way to do a job so they can have more time to themselves. And that's it. Ultimately you want to find a way to get the stuff done that you need to get done, so then you can move on to the things that are really going to make a difference to your wealth in your long term. So the key summary of a lot of what I've been talking about here is to work smart, not hard. Be very protective over your time. There's a book by Brian Tracy called Eat That Frog, and the principle of this is, if the worst thing you had to do in the day was eat a frog and you just got it done in the morning, out of the way, you would get a boost for the rest of the day. It would lead you on a good track to get lots of stuff done that day. So it's this concept of the hardest thing that you need to do in the day, usually the biggest income generating activity, get it done, attack it, because then you're going to have energy for the rest of the day. It's going to give you momentum to get through more in that day. It's usually hugely beneficial. Plan your day, or you're going to become a pawn in someone else's day. If you go into the office or you sit down to work towards building your wealth and you don't have a plan, you're just going to be pulled away. You're going to be pulled away by distractions, notifications on your phone, other people trying to grab your attention, other people's agenda, want you for this meeting, that meeting. It's so important that you plan and you understand what is taking you forward and what is pulling you back. Avoid task jumping as well. Try and see a task through to completion. A lot of people make that mistake. If you're starting on something that's really important and then, something else comes up because you've looked at your emails and, something else, you've answered that email, you now then need to get the momentum back on that task that you were working on before. It's a terrible idea. You want to see something through to completion, and if you don't have enough time in the day to see it through, you want to think about reprioritizing things so you can make sure you've got the time to complete the task. Don't get lost in your emails. Don't get lost in your phone notifications. I tend to turn notifications off on my phone. So I go into my email when I purposely want to review emails and respond. I make a time slot for that. I don't just allow it to pull me in every time someone's sent me a message. Same with a lot of the apps, Facebook, Instagram, all the notifications are off on that. The only exception that I have is WhatsApp. Probably a bad idea, but that's how we run our business. And during the day, I need to be on the pulse of what's going on in the business. So WhatsApp's on, albeit, a lot of the time my phone will be in my back pocket and I won't be looking at it when I'm doing a task that is important and I'm focused on. So, a few things. I've covered a bit on leverage there. I've covered a bit on eliminate, delegate, outsource where possible. All of this is in the theme of being aggressively protective on your time. If you want to move forward with your wealth journey, if you want to create generational wealth, the key to it is managing this most valuable commodity of time. If you are not aggressively protective over your time and understand the key areas that you need to be working in to move your life forward, then it's unlikely that you're going to achieve a great success in time. That's all from me. I've been Alex Robertson. This has been the Real Wealth Podcast. I hope you'll join us on this wealth journey.